Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's me. I am back. It is Sunday night, and this is Sunday Night AstroLive. I'm Robert Phoenix, and welcome to another edition of the show where I go all in on astrology. So tonight is no different. I'm not sure how I'm going to go tonight because I've been pretty talked out this week in a lot of ways, but it's all good. We're going to get together. We're going to hang out. We're going to look at the chart of the moment, which we always do. And then we're also going to look at the United States chart. I've had some requests from people to, have a gander at it. And I've done it before on a number of other occasions, but I'm not sure if I've actually done like a full kind of blown out representation of the US chart. So we're going to do that tonight. I'm going to get into the chart that I use, which is called the Sibley Chart, which was drawn up by a strange character named Ebenezer Sibley, who supposedly was a friend of Ben Franklin's. And there are a number of USA charts that are available and people can use. One of them is the Powell chart, and there are a few. Usually, the chart will look at either having Sagittarius on the ascendant. That's going to be the Sibley chart. The Powell chart has Capricorn on the ascendant. There are a couple of others. Some people have Gemini on the ascendant, and others have what else? Scorpio. I've seen Scorpio on the ascendant. So they're all around that sort of Capricorn, Scorpio, Gemini. Sagittarius, Trinity, with the odd sort of toss in there with Gemini. So we're going to look at that chart tonight, the Sibley chart, and we're going to explore Dane Rudhyar's position on the Sibley chart. And he is a proponent of the Sibley chart. Now, he says certain things about the chart that you cannot necessarily, what's what I'm looking for? I guess I look like a fucking raccoon tonight. I got to change these lights. Look, I may be 60 years old, but I still have a sense of vanity. Hold on. One second. All right. There we go. Okay, there we go. That's a little better. I don't look like Rocky Raccoon as much. It's a little bit better. Yeah, I think so. The shadows were not real complimentary. Every now and then I kind of do get hooked up on aesthetics. So I do differ a little bit with the great Dane Rudhyar in that I think you can chart political developments through a country's chart. Now, what Rudhyar says is that he believes that you can track like a social consciousness, which I believe that as well through astrology. And we've looked at a number of charts with a number of different countries. The latest being Australia, which I did about 3 weeks ago. So we're going to get into Rudhyar's schemata for why the Sibley chart works for the United States. And we'll look a little bit about Ebenezer Sibley himself, very unusual character, but not so unusual for his time. There were a number of other people around during that time period that had very similar interests. A.E. Waite, who was a member of the Golden Dawn and created the Rider-Waite deck, is kind of cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways. So we'll get into him, and we'll also look at, and I did this on the show on Friday, where I looked at the 9/11 chart as it relates to the United States chart, and I think it's one of those charts that, or one of those events in historical event that really does certify in a lot of ways the Sibley chart for me. So we'll get into that tonight. And then I also have been thinking about doing a chart for Kevin Paffrath, who is running for governor in the state of California. Now, I don't know if he's going to win or not, but he's got a really interesting chart, and he's kind of an interesting character. And I know a lot of my conservative friends would love to see Larry Elder unseat Gavin Newsom. Frankly, I'd like to see this Kevin Paffrath guy because, number one, he's young. He's 29 years old. So he's going to have a different mindset than Larry Elder, who is much older, and kind of rooted in this sort of very conservative, ethos. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot to be said for having a more quote unquote conservative mindset, because we've seen what the other banana mindset is like. It's just not great. So, and as I've gotten theoretically older, I've been paring away a lot of the sort of what I would call excessive need for government to play any role in my life. And a true conservative, a really true conservative, would limit that solely and specifically to just minor functions, that it would regulate interstate government, would regulate interstate commerce. That would be one thing that government would do. It would protect the borders, and it would have treaties with other nations. And that's really about it. That's really about it. Anything above and beyond that is pretty excessive. Whoa, speaking of excessive, look who's here. The man of the hour. Yeah, your hour is when this comes on, isn't it? You just know when that's going to happen. There he is. Jasper the Astro Cat. Yeah. And nothing, there's nothing wrong with those ideas. I just think that we're ready for something new. And I was thinking about this today. And I think it's really good that we're waking up and we're understanding, on the one hand, what we don't want. And I think that's really important, because you can't have what you want unless you know what you don't want in a lot of ways. You just keep paring those things away. We're in a Virgo cycle, and that's very Virgo-esque, is to kind of pare those things away so you kind of reduce them down to their essentials, right? So, but what we don't embrace, or we don't quite really reach out and cast our vision forward, is the type of world that we do want to live in. We know that we don't want this just completely obese monstrosity of a technocratic, plutocratic, oligarchy, communitarian state to tell us really what to do. It's pretty insulting in a lot of ways. They're not our parents, and we're well beyond it. Now they may have some kind of, who knows, extraterrestrial contract with with other farmers, right? Other galactic farmers to take care of the herd. I mean, that could be the case. But that said, we don't really need it. So what do we need, or what kind of a life or world do we want to aspire towards? See, I think that's really the kind of our next step in a lot of ways. And number one, what are the values? There are a lot of people who tend to be very religious, and I'm not knocking religious people. When I say religious, I'm really commenting more on the kind of the Christian mindset. And, they don't really, in a lot of ways, they don't really care about this world. Their goal is where they're going, and it's not here. It's not here. So their idea is like, well, whatever happens, I'm right with the Lord, and Lord Jesus will be waiting for me on the other side, and I'm good. It doesn't really have a lot of what I would call philosophical, spiritual, and imaginal investment into this world. And that's okay. But I think there are people here that are connected to this vast landscape of mystery that's right here in the background, and all these like megalithic gigantic tree stumps there that are petrified. But that's a whole other discussion. But I feel like we're in this phase where we're really just, we're all, people are fighting for their lives, or fighting for their livelihoods. And that's okay. I get it. Right. I get that we have to do that. We have to say no for the things that we don't want. I completely understand that. But we also have to say yes to what we do want. And again, I'm not endorsing Kevin Paffrath. I don't even live in California. But what I found about his campaign so far, which again, I don't agree 100% with, is that it's interesting and that he has some interesting ideas. He's willing to think way outside the box, way outside the box. And when was the last time you ever saw or heard like a quote unquote politician or public figure who is invested in some kind of position, with the public office or serving the public, have really interesting ideas? Very few and far between. Very few and far between. They're not all that interesting. They tend to run out the sort of the same staid and stale ideas. And if they don't, then the new ideas that they're going to give you are all going to be about, the green porn. Somehow they want to inspire people by giving them sort of the E.F. Schumacher, Dwayne Elgin version of the world where small is better and less is more. And you're not going to have a damn thing and you're going to love it, right? That's supposed to be inspiring. And they may dress it up in yoga pants and plant-based food and kind of feel good, inclusive imagery and symbolism on TV, but it's not really inspiring. It is not inspiring. It promotes kind of a social, how do I say this? A social fabric, right? A social fabric that's probably created in China. They probably created the new social fabric in a factory in China, but it's not all that interesting. It's appealing to these emotions and these feelings where everybody is cuddly and everybody is having a really satisfying and yummy carrot hot dog. But it's not inspiring at all. It's really not that inspiring. It's kind of like the 1960s are kind of warmed over, but with less really good drugs and less really good music and less really good rebellion. That's kind of what we're getting. We're getting the watered down version of that. So they're trying to infuse a sort of global community as this thing that's pulling us towards the future. And Elon Musk is going to make batteries that last 200 years, and we're going to have collapsible windmills, and all these things that they will roll out as part of the new social economy. And of course, Musk is out there telling people, dream. Why not dream? Life is beautiful when we dream. Let's try. Let's really try. Get up in the morning and try. Like Elon Musk to me is one of the least interesting people on the fucking planet. Okay, he's just not that interesting. Not that interesting. And when he talks about these ideas, or he talks about this kind of creative ideation and having something to live for, like when back in the 60s when Kennedy was president, we're going to go to the moon. I was like, oh really? Oh cool. All right, good. And you have all the space, and whatever you think of space and whatever you think of NASA, it was something that people were kind of excited about. Hey, this is kind of cool. Right now, was it just a big money laundering dump and a big diversion? Yeah, probably. Did they have other kind of program? More than likely, right? So anyway, that's what the beginning of the 60s was about. And we've lost touch with that. We've lost touch with the sense that like there's really cool things to live for. And they've just put a lid on technological development to the point where all the technological development that they've put together, they've managed to put into the fucking car jack. Okay. That's their new level of technological development. That's where they're putting the eggs in their basket, right? They're going to get in and they're going to insert the fantastic voyage inside of your body. And then they're going to basically monitor everything about your body and recreate your experience of being a human. It's not that exciting. It's really not that exciting. So one of the things that Paffrath at least talks about are kind of some interesting ideas that are outside the box. So we're going to look at this chart. It's a very interesting chart. And then I'm about to go into chat and take a look at you, see who's here tonight. But before I do, I just want to Um, just a lot of you people, watch other astrology channels, and including David Palmer, the Leo King. A lot of you know that his father passed away, and this has been a really, really tough year for David. Man, I mean, astrologically, he's just getting crushed with Uranus and Saturn, and this is a big time for him, and not an easy one at all. And I love David. He's a really wonderful person. And true confession, when David first came on the scene, I didn't like David. I was like, who the fuck is this Leo King? Well, what is his story? And then I started to kind of follow him. I mean, this guy's just all flash. Right? He's just all flash. He's really into himself. He's a Leo, double Leo. Okay, I get it. But then I, this must have been, I don't know, maybe about 2 years ago. And by the way, I'm just true confession here. I don't follow many other astrologers. I really don't. And there are some really good astrologers on the planet, really, really good astrologers. But I don't have time, and because I'm usually working with people or I'm researching things. So, but David is somebody I started to follow, and I started to see how hard he worked, and that really hit me. I'm like, man, this motherfucker works hard. He works his ass off. So then I began to think that it would be really good to have a connection with him, because it was also feeling like he was a kindred spirit, because the way that we approach astrology and the way that we approach this so-called reality is very similar. And my experience is that a lot of astrologers don't come from that place. Don't get me wrong, there are, but a lot don't. And a lot of astrologers are still very based. When I use the word based, I'm not talking about based in the sense that they're based, but they're based in kind of an older, I would say an older paradigm, but a more predictable one, and one that's much more connected to, either the new age or some kind of, progressive idea and social protocol. There's a lot of people in the astrology community that are like that. And when you get really, really popular, I don't care if it's astrology or music or writing, whatever you become popular at, and you kind of rise to the top. The amount of people that you generally attract tend to be more kind of, I wouldn't say lowest common denominator, but the big numbers are generally connected to kind of a more a mass consciousness. And just a much wider demographic, bigger demographic. It's just like the difference between, oh, I don't know, the who would be a good example here. Um, let's see. I'm just trying to, Towns Van Zandt or Steve Earle, and oh, I don't know, Alan Jackson. Alan Jackson's actually pretty cool. I like Alan Jackson. But somebody, Garth Brooks. Okay, I'm not a big Garth Brooks fan. I've never liked Garth Brooks. There's just something sweaty about him. He's an Aquarian, by the way. But it's like the difference between Towns Van Zandt and Steve Earle and Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks is going to have a lot of people that are going to just punch that ticket, America and this and that and this and that, right? But Steve Earle and Towns Van Zandt, especially Steve Earle, might write a song a little bit different. What? What's he talking about? Well, shit, that's not American, right? So this is what happens when you get really popular. And then when you get really popular, you kind of stay in your lane because you don't want to lose people. You don't want to lose the people that have come along for your ride and your journey, especially if you're making a lot of money off them. So you stay in your lane, and then all of a sudden your choices and your ideas and your content are predicated by staying popular and getting the most number of people to watch your YouTube channel and support your whatever your private enterprise, your Patreon, or get readings. And there are some people that are really popular that fairly popular that I think are not like that. When I think of Lada Ducheva, Lada to me is somebody who did a great job creating a business and a network, and became really popular. And I really like Lotta. And I think I've taught a couple of classes. I know I taught a couple of classes through her, and they were really good. And Lotta is somebody who has probably lost people because she's evolved. And don't forget, Lotta has connections with Central Europe and Eastern Europe. She knows what it's like in that part of the world to live under communism. Okay. She knows what it's like directly and indirectly, generationally. She knows what it's like. So I think she has some very clear ideas about what's happening. And I've always liked Lotta. And then even Heather Eland, who I think, cuts, and I love Heather, and I don't care if, Heather cuts a much more mainstream figure, and she does a really credible and skillful job of doing that without selling out. Heather's really good at that, and I tip my cap to her. She's fantastic at that, and she's doing a really good job of creating community. And she's popular, right? But when I go on her channel, she loses people. God bless her. She has to run that Star Wars credit at the beginning of our interviews, right? Like, hey, this is his views, not mine. And I get it. It's all good. And I love her to death, and I love the fact that she's super successful. But David is really popular. He's really popular. He has a lot of numbers. And he's one of those guys who's, basically crossed a line numerous times with, how he's interacting and interpreting this reality through the various systems that he touches. He's lost people. This has been a tough year for him, because when you get to a certain level, you're just going to have people that aren't going to be always like in your camp. Even art bands who were super, super popular would eventually do something that would piss people off. And when the fuck do you do this album? Well, we wanted to make hits. Well, and we don't really like it. Okay. So it happens, right? It happens. And I think, David has gone through that this year. He's had to deal with this kind of wave of resentment. And again, he's male, he's white, and that's really hard. It's a really hard thing to deal with when you get to a certain level. You're going to have a target. You're going to have a target on you. It's just the way it is. And to his credit, and I know it's been a challenging time, to his credit, he's kept going. And I know that there have been times when he's just, been really completely frayed. So he's had that. And again, it's that journey probably is not easy for him. I'm not all that popular, and I'm okay with it. But the people that do come here and do check the stuff out, they kind of understand it, and that's great. And the door is always open. You can leave, or you can come back, and or new people can come in. But on top of, I think, his struggle to kind of carve out his purpose and identity in terms of the social context and the social milieu, he's had some personal struggles this year too. And his father being, the latest. And it's really tough when you lose a parent. And David had sent me a photo of him and his brother and his dad when his dad was in the hospital. And they were all thumbs up. And I think David shared a few details about his chart. And I'm like, man, that guy's tough. Like that guy's a tough son of a bitch. You can see it in his chart. And it's, when you lose somebody like a father, it could be, or a parent just in general. And I know there are people watching this that have lost parents this year. It's not easy. It's not easy. Sometimes though, I'll be honest. Sometimes it can be a bit of a relief. I don't think that's the case with David though. I don't think it's a relief, but sometimes it can be a bit of, I loved my father. My father was great. He was a very interesting character, huge personality, big personality. And I always found like I was, how do I say this? I always felt like there was something about my throat chakra with my father that I really couldn't break through. And it would always come up when we were together. I mean, who knows? Maybe there were a few times I had a few cocktails and I said a few things, which probably got me in trouble. But there was always this sense that I couldn't really, right? And I would attribute that to my Chiron in Aquarius and my father being a Leo on the other side of the chart. So when he passed away, and again, I love the guy. He's tremendous and huge person in his own right. But there was, when he passed, I could feel that block in my throat just go away. It was a really kind of amazing, liberating, and scary feeling in some ways, because I had to admit to myself that even though I missed him, and because I'd love to pick up the phone and talk to him, I didn't miss the block in the throat, and I felt more liberated and free. And it wasn't as if I was fixated on the fact that I just can't speak my truth around you. And it's not really the case. It was just something that was there. It was almost like it was an implant in some ways. And I don't think he did the implant. I don't know. It's just one of those things that happens. And then the other thing that when my father passed, I could almost feel like his strength coming into me, which was an unusual feeling. It was a very unusual feeling. So of course I had some sadness. Didn't have a lot of remorse. I think we got everything we needed to get out. And the only remorse that I had to do with the fact that I wasn't able to see him like when he passed away. And I don't want to get into that. It's some family shit. But when we lose a parent, though, it does really impact us. And death is such a profound teacher. And I know it's a cliche, but it's so true. And when I have had the occasion to lose people in my life, it's a really oddly liberating feeling. Not in the same way that I'm talking about when my father passed away, my throat opened up, but you understand what's important. You understand what's important. Everything that is just complete, utter mice nuts and complete theater and Maya and bullshit just goes away. It just goes away. It just evaporates. And sometimes it can be a very painful experience because people are left with a sense of these things that were important. Well, they're not so important anymore. And the person that they may want to share their feelings with or share their perceptions with or share their thoughts with, they're not there. They're not there. And that could be a real problem because now you're having this download about what's important, what's not important, meaning, meaninglessness. And in some cases where you would have somebody that, and it doesn't have to be a parent, it could be a very close friend or a wife or a husband, God forbid it's a child. You don't want to have those conversations with a child, but God forbid it's a child. But when you are close to somebody and you do realize that the world is it's a ball of Maya, and you have those realizations, you would want to say something or have that conversation with that person that if you were close to them. And that can be difficult. That can be really, really difficult. And it doesn't even have to be a person. It could be an animal. It could be a pet. I remember when my dog passed away, it was like really heavy for me. And I had to put him down. And again, there was just this real sense of like liberation in what was important, what was really important in that moment. And I've told this story before. After I put my dog passed away, I had to put him down. I remember going into work and just doing my job. And I had a conference call that day with this label. And this label was an East Coast label. And the guys that ran the label were like totally slick, right? They're just like too cool for school. It was a dance label, a lot of money. And I always got the sense that when I was dealing with them, they were sort of dictating the terms and conditions because they got a big fat advance from the service that I worked with. And they were in the record business and they've been around a long time. And I'm a guy that works at a, computer company or whatever, internet company. And I remember that day just not even really giving a shit. And it really altered my interaction. Not that that I was rude or anything like that, but it altered my interaction with them in a way that was more real. So, David, whatever you're going through right now, and I will reach out to you. I hope that you're reconciled, and that you can take some time out and really be with whatever you need to be with. And I know a lot of people in chat might feel the same way. And I know that in your world, you have a lot of people that love and support you, but I love you. And I know a lot of people in chat love you. So, you know, you just keep doing what you're doing, take care of yourself, and I'll try to reach out personally. So there we go. All right, let's get into your world. What's going on, Chatlandia? Let's see. What do we got here? Let's see. Who do we got? Let's go back. Way back. Back into time. There's a story about one of the Butt sisters. Her name was Bertha. Bertha Butt. Remember that song? Jimmy Castor Bunch. Anyway, let's see what we got here. Let's go right to the top. Wendy Eater. What's going on, Wendy? Oh, I was on this show last night. It was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool show. Let me see. Let me see if I can find the link. Is Tom here? Tom Jordan probably knows. It was like I wasn't sure if it was live or not. Let me see if I can find the link. Let me see what we got here. Where are my notifications? Because I gotta pimp this show out. It was the glass spiders. Hold on a second. It was David Bardis who invited me. See if I can find it. Let's see what we got here. Hold on. Let me go into my messages. I'll find this thing. David Barsky. There he is. There we go. David Barsky. Let me just see if I can get on his. Give me 1 sec. Because I told them I'd give them a shout out here. Come on. Here we go. Weaving Spiders. It was the Weaving Spiders. That was really cool. It was a really, really cool show last night. So let me see if I can find the channel here. Weaving Spiders. Yes. Here's the channel right here. So these guys do these really, really, really epic long playing videos. And let me see. We're going to play on. Let me see what we got here. Hold on. I don't know if I see the show here. I'll show you the channel. 35. This is like what 42. I think this is 42 videos. I'm just trying to find the 32, 28, 27, 03. Let's go home. Let's see what we got here on the home channel. Not seeing it. I don't know. Maybe they have to edit it or something. But I'll show you the link here for the channel. I was on it last night. It was a pretty cool show. And they've got 76 subscribers. I think they could probably use a few more subscribers, actually, because they have some really interesting content. It's a kind of a unique sort of, long player show. So let me go back over here. I'll put the link in here to their channel. Give me 1 second. Let me put it right in there. It's a very interesting show. And these guys are super, super bright. And they're really into like synchromysticism and everything. And I really enjoyed my time with that. It's right there. Boom. Okay, let me go back to the top. Who do we have? Yeah, the reason I did, because Wendy was in there last night. She was in the chat. GG Reine de Blanc. Dawn Hart, what's going on, Dawn? Good to see you. Looking forward to seeing you again in October. Christy Daniels is here. There's my man, Mike. What's going on, Mike? Marie MacArthur. Joe Mama in the house. Natasha. Natasha. Hi. Hey, there's Ani. What's going on, Vigilani? Speaking of new YouTube channels, Steve Letro is here. Here is heaven because God is everywhere and God loves you. Put your buckets down. I love that. That is so cool. Julianne. Hi, Julianne. Michael Sisternino, DJ MC Benito is here. Mr. Diaz. What's going on, Benito? Josie Lewis. If a religious belief system is so concerned with hereafter that it can't make a change in the real world, it's useless. You know, I have to say that I'm a practical guy. You know, didn't Jesus talk about being in this world, right? You got to be in this world, not of it. I think there's a balance there for perspective. There's Ryan. There's Ryan, the introspective woodworker. Marianne Smith. Hello, Marianne. Yes, you're here. Paulette Hanson. What's going on, Paulette? Good to see you. Breview. Hello, Breview playlists. And let's see, Chris and Steve in the house. The Crimmies. I miss the Crimmies doing the Friday Farcast. Maybe when Steve finishes his magnum opus, he'll come back around again. Michelle on Wheels. Men plan and God laughs. Elon. No one you know. I'm all for more drugs, music, and more rebellion. I was too young to participate in the 60s. Let's see. Who else do we have? There's Joni. What's going on? Dr. S. W.C. Ray is here. Who else do we have here? Whimsical Farm Girl. Hi, Whimsical Farm Girl. Shiprod. David Palmer, president, Series 20. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of interesting kind of links with the name David Palmer. He was the drummer of the for not this David, but another David Palmer. Steve Judd. There's a shout out for Steve Judd. Susie Gemini. What's going on, Susie? Let's see. Amanda Kay. Oh, hey, you're welcome. Yes. Oh, Amanda, you coming? That'd be awesome. That'd be really awesome. Lapicius. Garth Brooks always seemed weird to me. I know, right? And then he tried to like do this weird alter ego, and to me, that's just like total like MK Ultra shit. Total MK Ultra shit. Being overly popular isn't an issue most of us are dealing with. I know, right? Rose McGowan's a Virgo. I just looked that up today. Rose McGowan getting all distilled and pure, calling out the Newsomes. There's MD, Mr. Demare. What's going on, Maurice? Looking forward to seeing you. Lana Anderson. Hi, Lana. Heather is a master of walking the fine line. I know, right? I know. She's like perfected this, the razor's edge, and she does have a lot of I don't want to use the word snowflakes, but she has let's just say she has a lot of people that wouldn't be tuning into my show. Let's say Joan says Betty Davis said if everyone likes you, you must be a pretty boring person. That's true. Michelle Taylor, I'm behind on him. He is a Leo and will always have a target. There's maybe some truth to that. Liz Lucius found Robert years ago from Lada. She has gone back to Bulgaria. Oh, another fabulous person who understands the communist creep is Marina Jacobi, non-astrologer. So Lada went back to Bulgaria. I don't blame her. Interesting. David always stays true to his spirit, and I appreciate it. Yes, he has. Absolutely. Yes, Mars Scorpio. I know. He's got that Mars-Saturn conjunction. Man, that's a lot. You can't please everyone. I give readings every day. While most people appreciate them, there are a few who react negatively. Well, you got to call it as you see it sometimes. Let's see. Who else do we have here? There's my man, Mr. Masaki at Kaida TV. What's going on, Masaki? Bell Bling by Debbie Vlog. There's Charles Mazak. What's going on, Charles? Good to see you still in the game. Jane in Austin. Hi, Jane. I lost my parents 30 years apart. Terrible experiences, each one very different. Let's see. Ani, grateful to be on my dad's side when he passed. I think it's a big deal. Hey, look, it's the Techno Brat. What's going on, EM? Good to see you. Here's my man Steve, Thor at the door. Who else do we have here? Miranda Couch. Hi, Miranda. Good to see you here in this zone. Let's see. The Loin Kings dad passed. I hope that's a typo. Chris and Steve, were you typing that together? Who knows? Maybe he is the Loin King. That could be. Weaving Spider. See, I knew you'd know that, Tom. I knew you would know that. Misty Minor, what's going on? Misty Minor Mountaintops. Oswald Spangler. Good to see you. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Oh, yeah. Regular Girl. Hey, what's going on, Regular? Good to see you as well. Sarah. Hi, Sarah. And Claire Guest. The other side has been showing us what they want. Agree that it's time to focus on what we want to create. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. Really, really, really important. We got, we can resist the tyranny. Shannon, what's going on, Shannon? The Lunar Lady. The Lunar Lady. Yeah, Robert Palmer. Raven Rain, what's going on, Raven? Good to see you too. Let's see, who else do we have? Tondar. Hey, Evan. What's going on, Mr. Magician? Evan Baker. JMP Love. I'll be seeing you pretty soon in October. Let's see. Is that it? You got everybody here? Oh, Betsy Hakey Russell. One of my favorites. Sue Leonard. Hi, Sue. Here we go. And Boris Segal. Hi, Boris. Welcome to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside. Come inside. I wonder if I want to see if I can do something here. Because we're going to be talking about America tonight. So I want to maybe see if I can play a tune here to kind of bring us into the mood. Into the mood. Let's see if we can find this thing. Oh no, Simeon Cox, the Silver Apples, passed away. All right, let's do this. Let's try this. It's not the Silver Apples, although I want it to be the Silver Apples, but let's do this. Let's do this. Let's bring a little musical introduction for our show tonight. Oh, hold on. I got to get my speakers going here. That was a fail. Hold on. Let's see. Same the system. Let's do built-in output. Let's do that. Let's try it again. One more time. Mm-mm. Here we go. try this again. Take two. I always love seeing the flag of the moon. I always love seeing the flag of the moon blowing in the space wind. I love that. Don't you get a kick out of that, Jasper? The flag of the moon blowing on the space wind? Yeah, you do. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so why don't we do this? Let's do a little, it's kind of an invocation. We'll do an invocation. And then we'll jump into, we'll do the chart of the moment, kind of figure out where we are. Like where are we? Let's see if we can figure that out. And then we'll get into the US chart. We'll jump into that. And the other charts, the charts that I think are kind of significant as it relates to the US chart. You know what I also did? I pulled up the chart for the Patriot Act. Oh, we might have a gander at that too. All right, so let's get into space here. Okay, dear blessed and holy Mother, Father God of the great central sun, within the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Son of Emmanuel, in all of creation, every single minute aspect and molecule. We ask that only the highest and best wisdom of truth come through this channel at this time, and in so doing, we affirm and decree the qualities of clarity and vision and endurance and commitment and community and coherence. And a special mention to our good friend David, who has lost his father, and everybody else who is going through a very difficult time on this planet, and the loved ones that may be leaving their life, whether they're organically and naturally leaving or being ushered out in ways that are less than humane, far less humane. We affirm a decree that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, clarified, and removed from the stream at this time. What do you say, Jasper? You good with that? You ready to roll? All right, here we go. Let's get into the chart of the moment. Let's start off there. That's a good launching pad. Interesting. It's another national anthem thing. Well, that's a trip. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted now. That's interesting. I'll have to check that out. Maybe I'll play that at the end of the show. Caught my attention. Okay. Let's do this. Let's go back here to the home page. And let's check out the chart of the moment. I think I have this set for Denver, Colorado. I was doing a relocation today. Let me change it real fast. I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world if I used it. But we are in Virgo, so let's try to be precise, shall we? So today, drove by my old place that I was living at in Fredericksburg. They turned it into an Airbnb. I knew it. I knew it was going to happen. It's actually pretty nice. What they did is pretty nice. I wouldn't mind living there. No, I'm happy with where I am right now, actually. But you just knew it was going to happen. They got 5 Airbnbs on that street now. 5. And it's a main thoroughfare, man. It's like one of the main drags in Fredericksburg. I honestly, if I was going to stay in an Airbnb, I'm not sure I'd want to stay in that street. I mean, it's not terrible. And I guess if you have to stay somewhere in this town, because apparently people do, I mean, probably a lot worse places. In fact, I know there would be. Okay. All right, let's do this chart at the moment. Let's bring this bad boy up. Yeah, a little bit different. Not much. Different degree on the ascendant. All right, here we go. This is where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. 20 degrees, Virgo sun, creeping up on Mars and Virgo. So let's see. Will it catch it? Will it catch Mars? Probably. It'll be 27 Virgo, 28 Virgo. It'll probably catch Mars in Libra, because Mars is only 2 degrees away from moving into Libra. So it'll get there before the sun does, but it'll catch up. So we'll have a Sun-Mars conjunction in Libra. When it comes to social justice and people standing up for their so-called rights, I think it could be a really interesting time. We've already passed the Mars opposition to Neptune. And, you know, what happened with that? Well, that's when the fearless, or should we say feckless leader of the supposed free world decided that he was going to get real tough and tell people that there's a new sheriff in town and people are going to have to essentially listen and obey. And if you don't, well, guess what? You're not going to be able to be employed, right? That's the Mars-Neptune opposition that was earlier in the week. So we could see that. We could see this, that there was this energy that would be, when we deal with Neptune, especially Neptune and Pisces, we're dealing with a lot of 12th house issues. That's one thing that Neptune and Pisces often doesn't get really sort of mentioned and worked out with. The 12th house is hospitals, right? And we have Neptune in its own sign, and it's retrograding right now. So hospitals are not doing really what hospitals theoretically have been doing and should be doing. Never liked hospitals. Do my best not to go there. So, but this has been the story, right? This has been the story, especially in this third decan. And the third decan is the Scorpio decan, because the second decan of Pisces would be the Cancerian decan, and the third decan of Pisces would be the Scorpio decan. So now we're talking about hospitals. We're talking about the underworld. We're talking about death, because Scorpio is related to death. It's really interesting how these decans can determine sort of the nature of the outer planets. And we've heard many a story about, you know, what takes place in a lot of hospitals, and a lot of them aren't good. They're just not good. The other thing too is that there's always a bit of a theatrical and creative side to Pisces. And what did we have last year? We had all these frontline workers doing, you know, Bollywood dances on TikTok and shit, right? It's very Piscean in a lot of ways, and they're all making little movies, but that's changed now. You don't see that much anymore, do you? You don't see those movies where they're kind of in your face with all their downtime and their creative. Now it's a fire drill. Now it's a fire drill. That's what's happening. So Neptune here is retrograding, but we did have that Mars Neptune opposition. Does the Emperor have any clothes? Do the orders have any teeth? Are they enforceable? We're going to find out. We're going to find out. Monday should be a very interesting day because now the sun is moving into direct opposition with Neptune. And, I watched some of the 9/11 memorial stuff. It was creepy. It was really creepy. I'll talk more about it tomorrow on the other channel because I want to keep this channel going for a while. But what I can say is that it felt like a funeral. It felt like a funeral. But it wasn't a funeral for the country. I'll talk more about that tomorrow. Anyway. So yeah, tomorrow we're going to have this very strong, very powerful Sun-Neptune opposition. And that's been happening once a year ever since Neptune went into Pisces. So it went into Pisces in 2011. So we've been doing this now for 10 years with this opposition. And I probably should go back and look at all those oppositions and see what was going on at that time. But here we go. We're in this place now where people are, in a lot of ways, much more independent about their health. They're much more independent about their health at this point in time. It's almost like they're being forced to be independent about their health. But then with Neptune on the other side of it, there's a lot of illusion, like what's real, what's not real, what can we believe, can we trust the science? That's a big part of Neptune and Pisces, because when we look into Pisces, we get into this whole duality trip, and we get into Jay Whiter and I talked about this, in moving away from the Piscean age, which is where we have these verifiable high priests of science like Tony Fauci or Bill Gates, even though he's not a scientist, not even a doctor. He's not even a doctor. Think about that. Jill Biden's a doctor. Jill Biden is a doctor. Now, she's not a medical doctor, but she's a doctor. She's got a freaking PhD. It's a cheap PhD, if you ask me. But she's a doctor. Bill Gates isn't even a doctor. You don't have to be, but there's no Dr. Bill Gates. He's Bill Gates. I wonder how he feels about that. Sure, kind of in some ways pisses him off on some level, because he'd like to be treated like a doctor, wouldn't he? Anyway, so we have Neptune here in all of its wonderful dualistic splendor, and we've seen this idea that these high priests of science who are untouchable are essentially creating the catechism of care for the 21st century. But it's not really working. It's not really working. In fact, it's having the inverse effect, really. And if you spend a marginal amount of time on YouTube looking at what's going on in places like France, and France is getting scary, by the way. Like France is getting very scary, because now there's a new introduction into the French protests. The nihilists now showed up at the French protests. Have you seen them? They've showed up now. They're going to get in now. Those are all agents provocateurs. So instead of people protesting against the mandates or protesting against the vaccines, now they've got this other element that's been introduced. It's the nihilists. And there are plenty of footage. There's plenty of videos where people are beating the shit out of each other in the streets of Paris. It's ugly. I look at that video, it kind of breaks my heart, actually, in a lot of ways. There's no winners in that. But that's happening now. This is happening all around the planet. The inverse of what they've been trying to do is converting people to a different way of interacting with reality. I mean, you could listen to any college football game, not anyone, but go into the SEC, go into the South, and you'll hear a chance of fuck Joe Biden, fuck Joe Biden. Whoever's playing Biden, it's kind of getting to him a little bit. Whoever's playing Biden, he mentioned it. I think it was at Shanksville. And he talked about, well, I'm talking about the people that, who should be here, blah, 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 blah. And they're not on the streets with signs that say, F you. And there's a video where he's going down that path. And whoever's playing Biden always brings it back to whatever Biden's experience is or was. So this whole thing is starting to kind of boil over into really epic proportions. And I'm not sure all of it is good. Honestly, I'm not sure all of it is good. You're starting to hear murmurs about the UN wanting to get involved more, that they want to have a new sort of UN charter, and they want to have kind of unilateral control. This is a big thing, right? Unilateral. They're talking about this now because they're creating this stage for chaos to erupt all around the world. Significant chaos. And that's what they want. They're okay with people protesting in the streets. They're okay with the systems breaking down. They're okay with people getting fed up. They're counting on it. You don't think that they were counting on this? Of course they were counting on this. Oh, look, they're protesting. They're pushing back. We didn't think. Of course they thought about that. They've got an answer for that. They've got a program for that. They've got an algorithm for that. But the thing about humanity that I don't think that they fully comprehend, although somewhere in the back of their minds, they have to know this, right? That as much as humanity is predictable, it's not. There's this tiny portion, this scintilla of humanity that is not predictable. And that's why they want to turn everybody into fucking robots. Because at that point, they'll be predictable. And they've done a fairly good job of creating some level of, scalable predictability. They've created scalable predictability, but it's not at a point where they can manage it all. They want to, though. So these protests that are happening, this global Weltschung, I think is what the Germans would call it. It's happening for a reason, and it should be happening, by the way. Like, I'm not saying not to go do it, right? I'm not saying not to, but when this energy starts to occur, they can kind of move it along. They can bring and introduce new characters into the play, like what's happening in France, and the nihilists are starting to get involved. And now people are fighting amongst each other. They're not a unified kind of front. They're not a unified. So these would be the kind of the European based version probably of Antifa or some other group that has been told to go in there and start cracking heads. You go in and start taking on the conservative French who, want France to stay France. So there's that. And when they have that, they have the chaos model in place. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't be protesting or stand. Absolutely, they should 100%. If that's what you're called to do it. If that's what you're called to do it. And we do need to be pushing back on. It's one of these things where you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you don't, they're just going to run the program. They're just going to run the program. If you submit, they're just going to run the program, and you'll just be like a sheep to slaughter. I mean, that's really the ultimate kind of end game with that program. If you submit to the program, if you don't submit to the program, then you have to do it in a way that is going to be different. So you're going to count on people flooding the streets. They're going to count on people doing what they're doing. So we have to do something different. And that's the nature of Aquarius. We have to do something different. And all this started on the 21st of December last year when Jupiter and Saturn were conjunct at 0 Aquarius. And it's the 20-year story. Are we going to deal with the top-down heavy excess of Saturn and the medical clampdown and the technocratic clampdown, the artificial intelligence clampdown? Is Ray Kurzweil's wildest dreams going to become manifest in the world? Or are we going to experience something different? Are we going to experience something that is more unique and more germane to our personal evolution? It doesn't mean we have to say no to technology. It doesn't mean that we can't have technology in this world that could be very helpful to us. And it is. Look, we're talking right now. We're having an experience. Technology's played a role in it. They're playing a role in it right now. But it needs to be on our terms. It needs to be decentralized so that we can make the most out of it. And that's where we're at. We're in this siege of hardcore centralization and hardcore decentralization. This is what happened on the 21st of December. So tomorrow, when we have the sun in opposite Neptune in this cosmic drama, we're going to be dealing with a lot of bullshit, actually. I think we're going to get heaping piles of steaming just bullshit tomorrow with this Neptune Sun conjunction opposition. So the idea here is you're going to have to turn on your high beams and really cut through the fog. It could be a morning fog. Tomorrow you might wake up and you might say, oh shit, I'll need 2 cups of coffee today or something like that. So you have to cut through the fog. But the good news is we got a nice Sun Pluto trine. On an individual level, I think that's really good because there's a sense here at the beginning of the week of some kind of pull that's transformative and healing, right? When we talk about Virgo, we're talking about healing and doing things that are really good for yourself, doing things that are going to be healthy. So you have choices. You have the Neptunian sort of carrot dangling out there. On a personal level, it's like, oh, fuck it. I'm going to go out tonight. I'm going to have a couple of drinks. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's the Neptunian carrot that's dangling out there. It's kind of, can you indulge in a narcoticized fugue state? Again, there can be some value in that. You can have some insight in some of those times. Or are you going to do something proactive and do something that's going to be good for yourself, which is what Virgo theoretically is about. And this is an aspect that's going to be happening more and more over the next 5 days. So when the sun gets to 24 degrees, 25 degrees, 26, even 27, it's beginning to separate. That's about a week period here. So this is a good time for people to kind of dig in right now. Virgo is one of these signs that has a lot to do with worst case scenarios. So this may be a good time to, look at things like, well, where are your preps? And what have you prepped? Are there things that you need? What's going on with the supply chain? Are we going to have issues with the supply chain? You're going to have to wait on something somewhere down the line. And the supply chain's an issue. It's going to be even more of an issue because places like companies like Ford and GM and Toyota, they're going to be making less cars. So when you make less cars, guess what happens? They make less parts for the cars. So if there's less parts for the cars, how's that going to affect everything? Well, it's going to affect everything because you're going to have to wait for parts. So this is something you need to, again, with this Virgo mindset, you should probably be thinking about that. In the course of the next week, you can really cover some ground in that territory. And I would also, probably look at doing things really that are pretty mundane. Pretty mundane. Like, could you take a first aid class in your community? Sometimes they'll offer them. Sometimes the local fire department or whomever will offer first aid classes. And again, I know that sounds really mundane, but it's not, because there's basic first aid that if you know what to do in emergency situations, you'll be better off. This is one of those weeks where investing in something like that could be really good. And what about vitamins and supplements? There's a war on them. Here, you got a moon, you got a sun, Pluto trine. Might be good to invest in some of those as well. So, what we want to do here is we want to deal with the illusion, the Neptune opposition to the sun. Watch out for disinformation. Watch out for misinformation. And then what you want to kind of pivot towards are things that are going to be helpful and healthy and having a sense of preparedness and a lot of things that'll pay off down the line. That's the Sun Pluto trine. That's really fundamental, right? Tomorrow when you wake up, you're coming into that Sun Neptune opposition. We got about a week with this Sun Pluto trine, which I think could be really good. Get a lot of work done. Venus has moved into Scorpio, which is nice and intense, right? So over the course of the next few days, this next week, Venus Saturn square, we're looking at that. That's kind of intense, That's an intense aspect. You're dealing with fixed signs. Venus and Scorpio is, to me, Venus and Scorpio has a lot to do with power. It's one of those aspects that kind of gets worked out in the power dynamics of relationships, power dynamics in things like money, sex. And usually with Venus, there tends to be levels of, potential manipulation and glamour. It's an interesting position for it just comes out of its own sign in Libra, where it's of course always quite fair. But in Scorpio, it's much more intense. Relationships, relating, possessions, legacies, right, can be much more life and death oriented. You get that kind of life and death feeling with Venus and Scorpio. And the square to Saturn, to me, has a lot to do with some of these mandates that we're going to be dealing with over the course of the next week, 10 days, 2 weeks. Because again, when we get into Saturn, especially in Aquarius, it's that top-down model. It's that top-down model. This is the gospel. This is the gospel of the new science. This is the gospel of the universal community, where you must adhere to the needs of the greater good, right? This is Saturn in Aquarius. And here we have Venus and Scorpio coming in squaring that. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very, that's all about power plays. And Venus Saturn squares in a chart, they're not always easy to recognize. I think Venus Saturn squares are easier than Moon and Mercury squares. I do. A long time ago, they did a study on. This was a real sort of scientific numbers-based astrology study. And they looked at couples. I forget who did it. It might have been the guy who did the black box stuff. Anyway, they looked at couples, and they looked at couples that were successful in their marriage. And the key astrological indicator was not what you would think. The key astrological indicator was that there was a Venus-Saturn square inside of that marriage somewhere, whether it was through synastry between two charts, or it was through the composite chart. And a lot of astrologers would look at that square and they'd say, "Oh my God, that's going to be hard. That's a hard square. You guys are going to have to really go through some, depressing times, and there may not be a lot of money, and you'll deal with the limitations of your relationship, and you'll be very utilitarian." And some of that might be true, but what they found was that the people that had the longest lasting relationships, the most enduring relationships, had a Venus Saturn square somewhere in there. So it's one of those aspects that, with more of a track record, it began to yield a different kind of series of data points. So sometimes Venus Saturn squares can be really, really good. So what's important to you? Like what are you willing to invest in terms of your relationship with, either your groups or your friends, or even this idea of Saturn, beginning to dictate sort of the scientific rules of engagement? What are you willing to invest in? What are you not willing to invest in? Here, to me, Venus squaring Saturn would be something along the lines that you're making a decision to have a different kind of relationship with that kind of model. And in Scorpio, it's very dramatic. It's very drastic. It's like live or die, So we're looking at this in the coming week, because there's going to be, I think, very, very clear lines. They just keep turning up the volume all the time now. They turn up the volume all the time. So we're going to have more high volume this week. And with this Venus Saturn square, it's like, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to deal with it? And with fixed signs, once you make decisions, they have very far-reaching decisions, or very far-reaching consequences. Not always bad, by the way. They can be good. I've been guilty of this in my life before, where it's like, oh, I don't want to feel any pain. I don't want to make that choice because I don't want to feel any pain. And yet those are generally the most important choices you could ever make in your life. So even if you back into it a little bit, it can be helpful. So this is where we're headed this week. This is a very intense territory. And it's beginning to set the stage for this Venus Uranus opposition, which is coming up in about 2 weeks. Not easy. That's not an easy opposition because it's still going to be in Scorpio. And we're dealing with this kind of Uranian element that's thrown into the mix. To me, that just reeks of financial stuff. Right? Your relationship with your finances, your relationship with your bank, Scorpio's other people's money. That's tricky. That's going to be, it could be, I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but it could be something along the lines of, well, if you're going to go into a bank and get some money, you're going to have to prove your medical bona fides. Could happen with Uranus Venus opposition, could very well happen. If you want to get unemployment, you might have to show proof of your bona fides, right? That's a Venus Uranus opposition, Venus and Scorpio, other people's money. So this week and the next 2 weeks, things are really heating up here. We're moving into fixed territory, really fixed territory. And Venus, all about relationship and how you're going to relate to it, how you're going to deal with it, and what's important to you. So things are really heating up. They're winding up, starting with tomorrow, Sun Neptune opposition, cutting through the fog with the high beams. I do like where the Sun and Mars is headed because they're ultimately going to be trining Saturn here. And again, the thing with astrology, when you look at certain aspects, they can work in any number of different ways. So the so-called powers that be or the elite, they can push an envelope with astrological aspects. They most certainly could. But they could also be very, very personal, very collective. And we're moving into more of a collective time. So it's kind of balancing things out. We're having much more of a collective response based on a lot of individuals arriving at the same point together, which I think is very equalizing. Because before, we're not quite there yet. We're still very divided in a lot of ways. But I think we're kind of less divided. We're moving away from the fractalization. And this is global, by the way. It's not just the United States. But we're moving away from a fractalization high point. You think that this is the high point. I think we've passed the high point. I think now what's happening is that we're doing our best now to cohere with values that are really important. And don't think that people aren't seeing what's going on in Australia. People are. Even though it's not on the evening news here, people are watching it. People are well aware of what's happening there. And it's scaring the living daylights out of people. And it should. It should scare the living daylights. And I don't have any answer for what's going on in Australia, except for maybe that there'll be a massive earthquake in that area, which will shake their world up. And I actually looked at that with the two charts in New Zealand and Australia. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. There was a bunch of swarms of earthquakes off the coast of Africa earlier today. That's kind of intense. It's that one area around the Canary Islands, Tenerife, that whole area, when there's really intense seismic activity in that area, it creates typhoons and tidal waves, some of which could possibly even reach the Atlantic coast here in this country. So there's definitely seismic activity going on. But I wish I had something really positive to tell the people in Australia and New Zealand that help is on the way, that these people who have essentially sold their country out will, wind up going through a major change of heart and mind. And maybe they will, but it's I think if something's going to happen there, it's going to be more about nature and more about tectonic change versus political change. Although, we hold out hope for that. Well, people are watching that. People are seeing that. People are now starting to put things together. So there's this coherence that's taking place. And I think that and the other thing too is we're starting to move out of this true node in Gemini. By January, it'll be into Taurus. Now, when we get into the true node in these degrees here, we're really in the thick of it, right? We're in the last 4 degrees of this nodal transit. So it's all first decan. And when we go back in time and we look at when the true node went into Gemini, it was really fractious. I mean, that's George Floyd territory. That's the summer of Floyd. That's Breonna Taylor. That's Ahmaud Arbery, Jacob Blake. I mean, talk about divisive. Holy shit. That in a lot of ways, that was the high watermark of this fractious divide. Now it feels like with the true node in Gemini, getting down in these final degrees, that it's sort of pulling together in some ways. We're getting to the end of this ritual, right? The Janus ritual of the masks. We're coming to the end of it because the true node in Gemini, which really is the epitome of the Janus ritual, is winding down. So by January, everything changes bigly. These last 4 degrees will seem like, in some ways, maybe an eternity. But I feel like we were shattered. We were shattered in June of last year. And how much more shattered can we get, really? I'm sure if they really wanted to, they could shatter the shit out of this place. If they wanted to, but in some ways they can't. And from a social perspective, like, that was a storm that we weathered. I'm going to say that right now. We weathered that storm. We did not have race riots. We didn't have them. They sure wanted them, but we didn't have them. All the so-called white nationalists and the white supremacists and the deplorables, whatever you want to call them, they didn't go out and start shooting and hanging black. Didn't happen. They would have loved it for it. Didn't happen. Conversely, I've watched this revolution in consciousness amongst Black Americans who eventually have sniffed out the BLM scam. They've sniffed it out. They've totally sniffed it out. And now they're kind of dealing with this sense of mistrust around the whole COVID thing. Big numbers in that community just said, no, we're not doing it. So they couldn't run. They couldn't run the race right. It didn't happen as much as they would have liked it to happen. We got through that. And I don't think we understand how important that was. That was really important. We weathered that storm. And now we have the new divide, right? The vaxxed and the unvaxxed, which is harder in a lot of ways. Because if you were if you had an interracial marriage or an interracial family, that could have been a real flashpoint during that time. But the majority of America is not built like that. It is a part of the American fabric, but it's not the majority. What we have in common as people is we have families. And what the COVID narrative, what the carjack narrative has done is it's split families. That's been difficult. That's been kind of next level. And people are having a very hard time with decisions that other people are making. Very difficult time with it. But we're weathering it. We're getting through this. We will get through this. So when we winnow down into these final degrees of Gemini, the idea here is to come together more, so that when the true node goes into Taurus, there's a kind of a new form in place. It should be. So hang in there, okay? Just hang in there. Don't throw in the towel. And please don't quit. Please don't quit. Don't quit. Don't quit. there's a revolution happening in education right now. We've been watching a lot of the mama bears come out and hit the school board meetings. On Friday, I saw a group of, I think I put it up on Twitter, group of students in, where is it, Colorado or Utah or something like that. They went into their school, and they went into their school the way that they always went into their school, which was the face that God gave them. And it was very inspiring. So we're starting to see some of that take place now too. We're weathering a storm. This is a storm we're in right now. This is a very powerful storm, full of blame, invective. Um, what else? Social pressure, and we'll get through it. We got through the summer of Floyd. We didn't kill each other. And really what happened is that the scam got exposed. The scam totally got exposed. And I don't think they can run the BLM scam again. I don't think they can. The leadership has been out as having multiple properties. And I don't, when they get to a certain point, they don't have the fight in them anymore. Like they've reached their promised land, the American dream. They've got multiple homes. Patrice Cullors has multiple homes. What kind of fight do you think she has left in her? Not much. Not much. Although I could be wrong. Maybe there's a lot of fire in there. But I don't think it's going to happen again. They played the card. They've actually brought people more together than not. And it's going to happen here too. Although this one's a little bit more difficult because it affects families, not just groups in society. So it's a tough one. But we'll get through this. Mercury is going to be moving closer into orb. Well, it's 7-degree orb with Jupiter. That's good. I love that. It's really inspired. Mercury Jupiter trines can be really inspired. And that's going to be moving closer into orb. And that's really good for negotiating and finding common ground. Finding common ground. And I think we're going to have an opportunity for more of that over the course of the next 7 to 10 days. I think you'll be surprised with some of the conversations you'll have with people that you may not have had. You may have had difficult conversations with before. They'll be easier. And some of them might even say, you know what? You were right. You were right. I should have listened to you. That's coming in this week ahead. Yeah, I think that's about it. Tomorrow, you're going to wake up with the moon in Sag, which I like, especially on a Monday. By the end of the day, it's going to start to square with Neptune, which can be a little fuzzy. Watch out for your emotions. Monday and Tuesday. Keep an eye on your emotions. Don't give them away. Don't give your emotions away. If something happens in the public sphere, watch how you're feeling about it. Watch how you're feeling. Don't give your emotions away. Don't bleed out. Don't throw compassion and care into places that it doesn't need to go to. Keep that in mind. Okay. All right. So there we go. Chart of the moment. So let's get right into this thing with the United States in the United States chart. Let's do this. Okay. Jasper, are you having a good time? Jasper's so mellow tonight. He's listening to the crickets. You hear those crickets, Jasper? Oh, I know it's here. Just had the damn thing. Here it is right here. Okay. All right. Let's go. So let's familiarize ourselves with the U.S. chart one more time. One of the things that Dane Rudhyar, whom I really respect as an astrologer, he's a giant in terms of astrology. The thing that I like about Rudhyar is that his body of knowledge is what I would call cosmic. Dane Rudhyar is a cosmic interpreter of astrological systems. He's a little, at times, he's a little, how do I say this? A little too esoteric because he's really into this whole idea of the Great White Brotherhood, this spiritual brotherhood that supposedly looks over the affairs of man and woman. I'm not sure how I really feel about that. Maybe at another time in my life, I would have thought more about it. So here we go. This is the U.S. chart. But one of the things he says about the U.S. chart, which I think is really good, and something that we'll get into the Rudhyar material around this chart, is that the Declaration of Independence, which again, according to Ebenezer Sibley, happens at this time. We'll get into Sibley as a character. And Rudhyar has a process that he works through with this to try to find events and then look at those events as it relates to both the natal chart and things like secondary progressions with the chart. And he's, by the end of doing that and really diving into that process, he's pretty much convinced that this is the chart. If it's not the chart, then it's maybe off by 4 or 5 degrees, but it's going to be Sagittarius rising. And I would tend to agree with him. Now, the other thing he talks about is that document was not signed by everybody on that day. They didn't all just sit around and pass it around. Say, put your John Hancock on here. That happened over time. So there was an initial group of signers which initiated that process, but it didn't end that day. So that's another thing to take into account. And then there's other things here. We're talking about the Declaration of Independence. Then we have the Constitution, or that's a different day, but this is generally regarded as the template for the United States of America. And as such, we have Sagittarius rising right there. And again, Rudhyar is pretty convinced that Sag rising. I think he's looking at maybe somewhere between 12 and 20 degrees on the ascendant. I think it's the right ascendant. Because when we think about America, what do we think about? We think about being expansive. It's an expansive territory. We're going to have a very Sagittarian kind of collective outlook. Religion is going to play a huge role in the story of America, for better or worse. And Sagittarius is a religious sign, and it tends to be a fairly orthodox version of religion. So the Abrahamic religions are going to, take root here in this chart. And we've often talked about the freedom of religion. That was kind of a big thing when theoretically the country started, that you could come here and you could practice your own religion. I mean, when you drill down into the Pilgrims, there are a lot of other things that the Pilgrims were doing. It wasn't just about religion. There were a number of other things that they were connected to. Religion is a good cover story, but it's true. They wanted to practice their own brand of religion. And even to this day, whether it's still kind of, embedded in the story here. Locally, we have the city council, and the city council voted on 3-2 to say a prayer before the city council. Very Christian sort of prayer. Maybe I should ask the mayor if I could say a prayer one night. Maybe I should do that. Say, hey, Charlie, I'd like to say a prayer. Can I say a prayer? Can I open the city council meeting with a prayer? Well, gee, Robert, I don't know. Don't you have a cult? Anyway, but this is it, right? We see this, the freedom of religion. Sagittarius on the ascendant makes sense. And the idea with the ascendant is that it would be more expansive. Now, because this is also the horizon, and this is really the eastern part of the chart, this is the western part of the chart. I mean, maybe you could make a case for Gemini being the ascendant, and then, the west would be Sag and it would open up, but I think it's a little bit, I think Gemini on the seventh house cusp is actually a really good aspect or indicator for this country, because relationship in the United States has taken on a number of different phases with relation, which one would expect with Gemini, and then you got the wild card of Uranus sitting right there on the descendant. So that we'll talk about that. We'll get into that a little bit. But here with Sagittarius on the rising sign, and look at Americans. I hate to say it, but Americans have become fucking fat. 2 years ago, I was one of them. It's a very Sagittarian thing. I mean, think about it. And by the way, I'm not here to fat shame people. If you're a big person, you're a big, whatever, it's fine. I'm not saying that there has to be one body type. Trust me on that. But we have ballooned, we have bloated, we have become these enormous kinds of beings, mostly based on really poor diet, lack of exercise. It's very Sagittarian in a lot of ways. So again, it's kind of making a case here of like expanding the body, expanding the physical body. So there's that. And then the other thing I always come back to with this chart has to do with all the Cancerian energy, Venus, Jupiter, Sun. And again, I think it's clearly this day is important because you're dealing with Sirius right here, right? The Sun conjunct Sirius and Jupiter. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for the Freemasons who are, sort of drawing things up, theoretically drawing things up at that time. Sirius plays a big role in their cosmology. So it's there, right? It's there, and it's conjunct the Sun. And it's very interesting with Venus in the seventh house, which is all about contracts and negotiating contracts. So I feel like that's even kind of part of it, right? So if they were going to have a contract with the people, which is really what the Constitution is set up to do, is to have a contract with the people, then you would have Venus in the seventh house. You would have Jupiter there in the seventh house with Venus, because it would be expansive, and that theoretically people could participate in things like the ownership of property, which is very Cancerian in a lot of ways. And prior to that, people could not participate in the ownership of property. Your kings and queens and barons and baronesses and dukes and duchesses, they're the ones that own the fucking property. They owned it. If they didn't like you on their property, you get the hell out. If you did the right thing and you gave them the right things and you allowed the king to sleep with your wife on first night or whatever, yeah, sure, you could stay where you were. And if you're a good slave and you sold other people out, you could probably get an increase in your property and then some. So this is different here. It's a different story. And you can see that, right? It's all here. Cancer has to do with the home, has to do with values. When we think of home, we think of personal property. So this is all about a contract with the people. That's Venus Jupiter conjunction. It's going to be a fair contract, right? Look what we have here. There's that Venus Saturn square. It's a wide square. It's 9 degrees, but it's a square. What did I talk about? I talked about the enduring nature. And if you think about it, if you really think about it, this thing has been kind of in play again, theoretically, right? We're just going to go by with the timeline that we've been working with here since 1776. I guarantee you, if the documents in place had been any less robust, this thing would have been over with by now. Over. And in some ways, it kind of went through iterations where it it did end. You could go back into the 1800s, where we move into a different version of theoretical governance. We could go into 1913, where the tax system gets installed. I mean, so we've gone through iterations here where the original blueprint has changed. There's an incorporation that takes place in the 1800s. You guys know the story, right? But still, the documents have been able to keep this place mostly intact for this long of a period of time. Had they been, again, any less robust, I think we'd have been completely done, and probably done sometime after World War I. That's what I think. Done after World War I. Done after they brought the taxation in. Done after the central bankers came in, because they wanted a global government at that time. That's why they had the League of Nations. It didn't work. There were too many people still in this country that were wedded to this idea of this document. They weren't going for it. So I think with the Venus-Saturn square, that's part of the longevity. That's part of the longevity of how you may think that 200 plus years is nothing. And it really is nothing. But how many countries have we seen just go through utter fucking collapses in an amount of time that we've been alive? Quite a few. So I think that, and even with time itself accelerating, because there's 20th century time, and there's, let's just say, I don't know, 18th century time. It's very different in terms of the time scale and the rapidity of events and speeding up of lives through technology. So that 200 years in 20th century time and 21st century time is probably more like 400 years, honestly, if we're playing with this old time scale. And this Venus-Saturn square, again, theoretically, should also be about having to deal with the law and fairness, because that's what Saturn in Libra is about. It's exalted here. And we have Juno conjuncting Saturn, which I think is a good thing, in that we do need to look at the laws every now and then. Are they fair? I mean, that's what Juno is supposed to be doing here. It's like, is it fair? Are these things fair? Are they serving the people? It's a good question. I'm not sure if that's the case. We have Chiron down here, down in the fourth house, which is in opposition to Saturn. Ultimately, I think Chiron is both a weakness and a strength for the country. It's a strength because, I guess, if you go back and look at World War I and World War II, we're willing to serve up our youth from our families to go fight in, some foreign war somewhere, right? I mean, that's, to me, that's like the home. The fourth house is the home. And when you have Chiron there, you're hacking into the home. You're taking male energy out of the home. You're taking the young men and throwing them into these conflicts, whether they're in Europe in World War I, World War II, or Vietnam, or most recently in Afghanistan and Iraq. That, to me, that's Chiron. And for better or worse, right, we've played that role there. Also with Chiron, again, this whole idea of owning a home plays a role with Chiron. In Aries, it's like we get to assert our will, and this idea of property ownership. And again, you may say, well, the fucking bank owns your property. You don't own your property. There's, of course, if you want to drill down into the weeds around that, yeah, if you want to own your home, you'll have to go through Chiron, really go through Chiron to own your home, okay? Violence is another component here, in guns with Chiron in Aries. And the United States is getting ready to go through its Chiron. It's been here again before. Chiron's a 50-year cycle. So we've been through this before with Chiron. That would be in the 70s. But it's a part of the chart. There's violence. There's violence in this country. More violence in this country than a lot of other countries. But there's also the idea that you could also defend yourself as well. And Chiron and Aries, to me, also represents things like gun ownership, defending your home, defending your property. Look, Chiron's got a sextile to Mars right there. That's the ruling planet of Aries. And so that's something that theoretically is part of our story. We have this relationship with Mars here, and Chiron is there to bring that Mars energy, into alignment. The seventh house, which is about, again, fairness, adjudication, contracts, agreements. So this is a very interesting chart, but it clearly is under duress. The chart itself is under duress. And we're going to talk about the Pluto return. That's really sort of the genesis here, is the Pluto return. There are other things that I talked about on Friday. I talked about the true node in Leo. And the true node in Leo, to me, is it's a really big part of the American story, because the true node in Leo is heroic, theoretically, right? It's about heart. It's about performance, performing, ego. It could be the big child. But to me, the true node in Leo is a big part of the American story. It brings us people like John Wayne and Babe Ruth, for better or worse, right? And the South Node, which is in Aquarius down here, is something that, again, inside the chart, we're sort of moving away from. Now, one would say, well, this is the energy of kings and queens and things like that, which is true, because that's what Leo's about. But because of the document and because of sort of how it was set up, the idea theoretically was for this aspect to be embedded in a way that would in some way be inviolate, right? The eighth house is a fixed house. So that this idea that people could tap into this energy associated with this country and do things like borrow money, which is a very eighth house kind of thing. You're going to borrow money so you can buy property. That's part of the deal. You're also going to go through that eighth house to find things like, courage. And, there are stories here in this country where there are self-made people. Not everybody, is like a made man and has things handed to them, like maybe Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. But that's part of the mythos too, was that true node in the eighth house. On the downside, that true node in the eighth house could also indicate that there would be hidden forces at work, the people that would be connected to things like kings and queens and royalty that may still be a part of the story that we would have to flush out at some point in time. That could be very much a part of that true node. But this is how we're supposed to evolve as a country, as a people, is to find that place inside of ourselves in the darkest of times, really, like now, we're supposed to find that part, that beating heart of a collective. And that's what that's about. So what we have is we have Saturn down here hitting that south node. And on Friday, I looked at the chart for 9/11, which I'll bring up again. But when 9/11, the event hit, transiting Neptune was right on that south node. And we have not been the same since then. It took us out of that eighth house. And even when you look at some of the financial shenanigans, the day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld said that there was $5 trillion or some really fucking enormous amount of money that had gone missing in the Pentagon. He talked about that the day before 9/11 happened. By the way, it also is related to the guy who was the quote unquote comptroller of the Pentagon, who left, by the way, right after all that money went missing. His name is Dav Zakim. You can look that up. Gee, I wonder what they did with that money. I wonder where that money went. Very interesting. That's Neptune right there in that south node, man. Just sucking that money right out of that eighth house. Right, that's Neptune's like a whirlpool down there. And then we suffer the carnage, the damage, the psychological damage, all the stuff that goes along with it. And we have this brief moment of triumph and bravado, and we're flying the flags and all that shit. But we're not the same. We're not the same from that moment forward because of that Neptune conjunction with the South Node. And I talked about this with James Bartley on Saturday. It's Friday. I hope that show gets up. But there's this big transition during that time after that, where this whole idea of like masculinity and bravado begins to just get drained out of the country, drained out of the collective psyche. That's Neptune on that south node. And it's as a result of that, we're getting moved into more of this collective kind of spell with Neptune, but it's not a great spell. It's a bad spell, actually. It's not a great spell. And now here's Saturn down here in that south node. And it's, what are we going to do? What are we going to, because we're seeing it now. We're seeing this Saturnian overreach, and we're starting to see the trance, right? We're starting to see this fairy tale of this kind of collectivist society. We're waking up to the fact that this is really what is going on, and there's no, and they've got the pedal to the metal, and there's no looking back. So whether it's, collectivist in terms of education, or collectivist in terms of medicine and science, or collectivist in terms of media, how the media, sports, even, it's all there. It's all there. We're seeing it. Saturn's there, and it's at a really, major point. This transit of Saturn is at a really significant point, because we're waking up to it. And you go back and you look at 9/11, and yesterday was the day, right? Yesterday was the day when people would go back in time. Neptune being in Pisces retrograde, taking us back in time, taking us back to theoretically that day that happened. And who did we see there? We saw the Rogues Gallery there. Saturn had showed up, right? The Saturn was showing its face, but it was showing its face in a way where this idea of Neptune becomes very tenuous, very tenuous. And you can see that the emperor has no clothes. And they may be wearing masks up to the gills, but they have no clothes. That's Saturn conjuncting Neptune from that time, right, on the south node. And this is a really important period in our here in this United States, our collective dream. And we have to awaken from it. It's the most imperative thing that we can do. Because if we don't, then the rest of the world will suffer a similar fate, and perhaps even worse. So this is a big time. And this leads us into the Pluto return of the country, which is at 27 degrees Capricorn. Now, Pluto will begin to make its entrance at the beginning of the year. But I'm really looking at a very specific day for the Pluto return of the United States. And that day is the 2nd of March. Because on the 2nd of March, there'll be a conjunction with Mars and Venus in Capricorn, right on transiting Pluto and right on top of the United States Pluto. So I think that that's a major time for this country and for the world at large, because you could just hear the rumblings, or you could hear the sort of the sound bites coming out of the UN. We've got to have more control, of a more, unilateral kind of process. We'll be the uni and you'll be the lateral. That's starting to happen. So when we get into this idea of the Pluto return, which theoretically could be the end of this country, I mean, make no mistake about it, we're coming to a major transformational point, huge. But how is it going to go? That's really the big question. That's the $64,000 question. So let me bring up the chart, and we'll take a look at it. Here, let me show you the US 9/11 chart. If you didn't see the show on Friday, because some of you don't go over to my other channel, that's okay. But this is what I was talking about. You can see transiting Neptune right there on the south node. That's money. That's money. How much money was that? $5 trillion? I think it's $5 trillion. I mean, it's just like a number. It's like, what the fuck? And I remember I was on this message board, and these guys were, they were all like kind of successful lefties, successful West Coast lefties. Most of them, God bless them, were Jewish. I don't care. Some of them were really good guys. Some of them were kind of steeped in their ideology to the point where they were just lost, and I couldn't deal with it. When I say ideology, I'm talking about political ideology, but not religious ideology or familial or cultural idea, political ideology. But I remember bringing this thing up about the money. It's like, man, do you guys see that? There was like fucking $5 trillion that got heisted out of the fucking Pentagon. And they were like, it was no big deal. Oh, that shit happens all the time. Really? It happens the day before 9/11? I don't think so. First of all, 9/11 doesn't happen every day. Second of all, $5 trillion just doesn't go evaporating right out of the Pentagon. So there we go. Second house is assets, money, and resources, right? There's that Neptune sucking right up out of that eighth house. Now we've got Pluto over here, right on the, look at that. Pluto transiting on the freaking ascendant. That's the time, right? It's right there. 8:48 in the morning. 8:48, 9:48, Pluto is not on the ascendant. And this is where I think the United States chart with Sagittarius rising, it's right there. You can see it. You can see the results of Pluto. That event transformed America and the world. Period. End of story. To me, the Sibley chart is the money chart. You can just see it. It's right fucking there. Pluto on the ascendant, okay? And everything changed. Laws changed. Travel changed. We have DHS and TSA and, that's what happened. Big changes, huge. Pluto-Saturn opposition right there. And Saturn, of course, being the governing force. A new contract comes out of this. It's called the Patriot Act. Right there. Saturn-Pluto opposition. We're a different country after the Patriot Act. Our rights are abrogated. It's not the same country anymore. We've seen this happen over the course of time with the United States. Was it 1857 or whatever? 1913. We have the New Deal. We have the war on power. Every time these things get baked into the system, the country becomes it becomes less of what it was. Right. So it's happened over time, and Patriot Act is just another iteration of that. You can see it right there. There's a new contract with the people. Saturn, Gemini, opposing Pluto. The country's going to change. This event is going to transform kind of how things are going to unfold from this point forward. To me, it's clear as day. The other thing that really blew my mind when I brought this up is that there's, in fact, I didn't even really go into this part, but I will, is that if you look at the midheaven of this event at 8:48 in the morning, Sirius is right on the midheaven. I mean, it's right on the freaking midheaven. Again, Sirius being the fixed star that plays a huge role in everything from the placement and the erection of pyramids and temples to baseball stadiums, right? Sirius and Orion, those are the two luminaries that are always lined up with these megalithic sites, or in the case of baseball, these temples to sport, especially baseball, because it's a Freemasonic sport. So it's right there. Boom. We're looking at Sirius on the midheaven, 8:48 in the morning. Here's the sun right there. It's the United States. The sun of the United States right on the midheaven, front and center. Boom. Right there. And then we have what's happening, right? We have the ascendant is Libra, and the United States Saturn is right there on the ascendant. Look at that. Right on the ascendant. So we have Pluto transiting the United States ascendant, and then the United States Saturn is right on the ascendant at that moment. It's hard. That's a hard ascendant because we're going to be dealing with more Saturnian involvement, again, dealing with things like laws moving forward. Part of the deal right here. Mercury Saturn conjunction. It's not an easy conjunction. I mean, honestly, when I look at that conjunction, good luck speaking about this event. Good luck. Good luck bringing it up. Good luck talking about it. Now, over time, I think we'll get to the bottom of it. We will, because that's the nature of Mercury Saturn. We might be closer to that than we think. But in that moment, in the aftermath of that, not happening. Not happening. Just not happening. They're going to manage that, stage manage that the whole aftermath of that event. So I just wanted to show you this because of the United States chart as it relates to Pluto, which is huge, Saturn, the new contract, and then Neptune down here, just draining away the blood. Like the vampires just drained away our blood during 9/11, just sucking it out. The parasitic vampire class is just sucking it out. So it's a huge, huge period of time. There's some interesting things going on, aside from that. But when you play with like the outer planets, and the outer planets are significant, look, there's Uranus. Uranus is right there. Like I said on Friday, it's explosive. It's explosive, and it's conjuncting the U.S. moon in Aquarius. So it's going to disrupt our, normal patterns of, how we live, how we communicate, how we travel. Again, third house. It's big time, big moment. Okay. So let's go into the Pluto return of the country. Okay, that's the chart. Here it is, right here. Hide now. Okay, so there we go. This is the Pluto return. You can see where I have it as March 2nd, 2022. I think February 2nd would probably be an interesting day too, because you're just going to have all those twos lined up. 2, 2, 2022. So you'll have essentially what? February 22nd too. That'll be really interesting. That's the beginning of Pisces. So you have 222, and you'll have 222. That'll be really interesting, right? 222, 222. So that would be ultimately you'd have 4 and 4 and 4, right? Or you'd have 6 and 6, 66. Put those two together. A lot of different combinations to play with. So 222, 2022, very interesting day. But this day, 3/2/22 is the day that I'm looking at, because here we have a Mars-Venus conjunction with Pluto, participating in this major transformational period of time, the Pluto return. Honestly, when I look at the Venus-Mars conjunction, my thoughts go to like heavy duty Capricorn energy. Like this is to me like the new sheriff in town kind of energy, especially with Mars. And can be very forceful. Mars Pluto conjunction, very forceful. And Venus here to me is less about the feminine and more about, again, contracts and negotiations and agreements. And Capricorn, deals with meting out justice or meting out the law. And to me, this is sort of like this very intense, forced, kind of concentrated attempt to, how do I say this, enforce a new law. or enforce a new order. This is very powerful energy. Okay, this is not something that is inconsequential. And Capricorn is super utilitarian. Capricorn is super efficient, right? It doesn't give a shit sometimes about feelings. Corporations don't give a shit about feelings. When they say they do, they're lying through their fucking teeth usually. So this is part of the enigma of Capricorn and the harshness and the intensity that for me, you'd have to take this into account with the Pluto return. And it doesn't stop there, because obviously we're going to have both Mars and Venus following this pattern together in 2022, and they're going to hit the United States South Node. That's, to me, that's really vulnerable. That's a really vulnerable period. And I could actually see that as a time where there could theoretically be, an outside force, right? That would be potentially, getting in there and say, look, this is out of control. We need to have more order, especially when it's Aquarius, which is, again, kind of related to sort of this global governance and communitarianism and the UN and all that shit, right? I could see that this is a problematic time. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And it's all connected in there with the Pluto return. Now, there's other things that are happening, like during that phase and that period and that cycle, that could be, how do I say this, interpreted as being positive. For instance, Jupiter is going to be in Pisces next year, and it will be trining a lot of the Cancerian planets, this big stellium in Cancer that this country has. Jupiter will be trining a lot of those planets, which could be really good. It could really be a tonic for the troops in a lot of ways. It would help us remember kind of what these values are about. And Jupiter Pisces is very interesting energy. It can be really faith-based. It could be it could look very religious at times, Jupiter and Pisces, but not necessarily in a bad way. It could be very inspiring, actually. So that energy I like. Jupiter trine, Jupiter Sun trine, Jupiter Venus trine, Jupiter. That to me, that's really good energy, and it has the potential of unifying people too. Because Pisces is, even though it's dualistic, but when Pisces comes together, it can be very unifying, and very powerful and very tidal. So we have these two kinds of stories getting played out. For me, one is really this Mars, Venus, Pluto conjunction, which I think is very intense. And then we have this other kind of energy here, especially this day. We got Moon in Pisces, Sun in Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces, which is what I would say in a good way, not in a bad way, kind of a shot in the arm in a good way, not in a bad way. So I do like that energy. It feels a lot more, in some ways, kind, and also expanding these values, these Cancerian values, which are opposite these Capricornian values. So I like the energy. I am a little concerned about the Jupiter square and squares to Mars next year, because when you get into that square, that can be a bit problematic. And, we have Mars here in the United States chart at 21 degrees. So Neptune is already squaring Mars right now. We're going through the Neptune-Mars square. That's difficult. That's really, that's all dissipative energy. It's just draining the fuck out of Mars, right? It's just draining it. And usually when you have, to me, a Neptune-Mars square it's about addiction and about victimization. And it's about, to me, that's about like draining morale. It's about draining morale, draining this kind of, this life force. And Mars in Gemini is pretty restless too. I mean, by and large.
So this is a difficult transit right now. We've been going through this for a while. And again, when we get into things like Neptune, we get into things like hospitals and drugs, right? Squaring Mars, addictions are coming up. What are we addicted to? Are we addicted to authority? Are we addicted to our own slavery? There's your Neptune Mars square. It's a big transit, man. Huge. And next year, Jupiter's coming in and make it even bigger. What's that going to look like? Are people going to be on some kind of a crusade? Are they going to be able to kind of overcome this kind of zombification with this Neptune Mars square? Will Jupiter provide that? We'll see. It feels to me like next year, with a lot of this Jupiterian influence, that the religious programming, the end times program, is going to be really big. You think it's big now? Wait till next year. Wait till next year. That's going to be huge. What? So, but it could also be kind of weird and interesting too, and maybe strangely inspiring, which is part of the Piscean sort of, program in some ways. But this to me is kind of the big kahuna moment right there, because it has to do with Pluto. It has to do with the foundation, the second house, money, the money story, bankers. 2022, I think, is going to be really shaky with money. I mean, Janet Yellen's already talking about it. Oh, we're running out of money. Really? When did that fucking happen? But I think, that's part of the story too. You're dealing with Capricorn, and you're dealing with these oligarchic kinds of energies, these banking energies. So do they want to have a financial reset? Is that part of it? Could be. I mean, this is major. Okay. Next year is a big year. It's huge, huge. Numerologically, I do like the 6 number. We're going through a lot of trials with 2021 with the 5. So when we get to 6, there's a little more balance with 6. I do like the transit of the true node into Taurus, a little more stable, a little more solid ground. I like the fact that we're kind of unifying a bit here towards the final degrees in Gemini. I like that. That's happening. I can tell you that right now. You think it's not how it is happening. But the big story is going to be the Pluto return and what comes out as a result of that. And I think we'd all like to have this magic moment where everything changes and everything shifts, and we don't have to deal with this bullshit, this madness anymore. And I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm not here to rule that out. Okay. But there's something about this process that we're in right now that is really important. Like, there are things that we have to learn individually and things that we have to learn collectively. And I think to some degree, Mars and Venus, especially on Pluto, could have something to do with, us authoring our own authority, but I don't think it starts off that way. I think it's enacted, but I don't think it starts off that way. And we could begin to take on some of those Capricornian qualities for ourselves, which we should anyway. But I think this is a big time, and we'll probably see a lot of this start to happen even in January. But this time in March, with this Venus Mars conjunction on Pluto, and Pluto there too, I think it's very significant. And we've got Mercury in Cancer, which I really like. I like Mercury in Cancer. It's empathic, it's intuitive, it's receptive. But here, with all these planets on the other side, we don't care about the feelings. Okay, we don't care about what you think. We don't care about how you want to administrate your own self-care, because that's what Cancer is about. There's a lot of that there, right? To me, this is just fucking steamroll energy right here. Big steamroll energy. And we'll throw in a little bit of Vesta there. And Vesta, can be about awakening. It can be about remembering something. Remembering kind of perhaps why we're here, why you're here. So it's a big chart. I think the biggest aspect for me is happening down here. and also the Jupiter-Mars square, which would be part of the ongoing Neptune-Mars square, which we're going through now. Not easy. Not easy. That said, hang in there. This is it. Like, we're coming to this place. We're coming to the end and the culmination of a cycle. And when we come to an end of an age, things get really weird. Really weird. They just get fucking weird. And we're witnessing it. We're coming to the end of an age. Astrologically, we're coming to the end of a historical timeline for this country. And will we be able to create something new out of it? The answer obviously is yes. There will always be something new. Will it be better? Will it be better? I think once Pluto clears that south node, the answer to that to me would be yes. But that's a whole other discussion with Pluto conjuncting that south node. But I think there's something there in a kind of an unusual way. Like there's maybe the birth of something new with Pluto there. And maybe it's time for that to be kind of raised out of the past. I was watching John Levi today, and this is something that I think kind of fits into this a little bit. He was doing sort of a breakdown of this guy who had done a lecture, I think, in Utah, and his material is very much along the lines of John Levi's. And there was a map that showed that the United States was freaking Atlantis, okay? And so he was talking about, so for me, this Pluto conjunction of the South Node has a lot to do potentially with this idea of Atlantis being resurrected. Because that's the past, right? That South Node is the past. And when I think of Atlantis, I think of really a very Aquarian kind of place with Aquarian kinds of technologies. And when I look at more and more of the Tartarian stuff, to me, I mean, the Tartarian stuff is really very Atlantean in my estimation. So anyway, could that be part of it? It could be. So, don't fear the Reaper and don't fear Pluto conjuncting the South Node, because we could be pulling something from our collective historical, mythological, chronological past to bring it into the present. Could be interesting. All right. Okay. So there you go. That is the big Pluto. And again, Pluto's going to be on Pluto for, till into 2024, begin 2025, when it moves into Aquarius and then starts headed towards that South Node. So this is a process. Okay. It's a process. Pluto, there are very definitive starts and very definitive endings with Pluto too. So even though it's a process, the process itself is not Neptunian and drawn out like it's been since it went into Pisces. Like Pluto is an intense process, but it's a process nonetheless. Okay. All right. You know what? I'm going to skip the Patriot chart. The Patriot Act chart. I'm going to skip that. It's getting kind of late. I know a lot of people want to go to bed. So what I will do is I got interested in this guy, Kevin Paffrath. And I started talking about him at the beginning of the show. And I found it was interesting that when they were looking at the polling numbers, that Kevin Paffrath was ahead of both Gavin Newsom and Larry Elder. And I'm like, well, who is this guy? So apparently he's some kind of, I've never heard him before. He's some kind of really popular real estate YouTuber. Okay. So he's got a baked in audience already. I think he's got pretty good numbers too. So I decided to look at him a little bit more. And he says that he's a Kennedy Democrat, which is kind of a real throwback, right? It's a real throwback idea of being a Democrat. Kennedy today would be much more closer to the right, by the way, than say Ocasio-Cortez, way closer to the right. So I'm intrigued. So I started to watch a little bit of his videos. He's very funny. And he's very personable. And let me Here, let's do a little Kevin Paffrath primer. Now, this is a long it's a long video. I'm only going to play a little bit of it. It's a 52-minute video, but I'm going to play a little bit because I think he's interesting. Like I said, I don't agree with everything, but at least he's fucking interesting. At least he's saying some things that are fairly unique and different. And he's not polarizing. Although if you're a Democrat, he might be a bit polarizing because he does go after some of the stupid shit that some of the Democrats say, like Ocasio-Cortez. And he does go after the Federal Reserve too, which is interesting. So let's meet Kevin Paffrath together. Here we go.
If California had a strong leader,
clean up the problems in our state and stop wasting money, we could have no income tax for any income earned under $250,000 and finally make California competitive again. But we've got some things to talk about first. Why does California, the fifth largest economy in the world, struggle with crime, schooling, homelessness, and can't even keep the power on or supply our farms with enough water?
The crime trend prompting a major retailer to make a drastic change. We've learned Target is cutting its hours after a spike in thefts.
Every day there's fires, guns, knives, crime. There's a lot of crime here.
In San Francisco, carrying handbags
Because of organized retail theft.
The number of homeless tents and encampments has been skyrocketing.
They've taken over everything. And we're concerned about the safety of our employees.
My name is Kevin Paffrath, and I'm running for governor to provide the solutions we need to end the bullshit that's happening in our state.
Higher electricity bills, periodic rationing, and blackouts for millions of households and businesses.
For the most gridlocked city in the world.
Very horrifying. The wind,
It's terrible.
the fire, and the speed of it, it just overtook everybody.
Why is this happening to our beautiful state? It's not because of hardworking Californians who follow the rules and pay their taxes. No, it's because of the broken policies of our government. It's broken leadership that leads to fragmented rules and regulations that don't look at California as a whole. We need a new leader to fix this mess.
So California has implemented a lot of regulations at the state level and also at the
brutal.
federal level that makes it
Try starting a business in California.
very expensive to build new housing.
The beef that comes from the cattle it feeds is the highest water use food commonly available. Drip and sprinkler irrigation can be much more efficient, but Nancy told us she's not been able to get the permits needed to change the irrigation style on the farm.
They handcuffed the LAPD and told them you're not going to enforce anything because we don't want to offend anybody.
The insanity of the education system where kids can't learn to read. I mean, literally don't know how to read.
The bullshit. I like this.
By now, you probably know that my name is Kevin Paffrath. All I did was take that money and plow it.
He's 29 years old, a multi-millionaire in real estate and the stock market.
And is now probably worth almost $700,000 on a busy.
He's got 1.6 million followers on his Meet Kevin YouTube channel.
In our research, in our interviews, and in our studying, making sure that we solve California in the best way possible.
He's got an ambitious one-year, 5-point plan to fix California.
The homelessness, schooling, poverty, crime, very, very important. Then we'll get into solving our traffic crisis and our housing crisis.
And he's running for governor as a Democrat.
So I want to get back. I want to fix California and make California a wonderful place to live because it is a beautiful place to live. We just have broken politics.
A Democrat challenging Governor Newsom in the recall election. He's 29-year-old Kevin Paffrath.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Paffrath is a Southern California real estate investor who's followed by millions on YouTube and other social media platforms. He just completed 9 rallies in 10 days across the state. He was in studio with us tonight on the Fox 11 News Special Report.
Guess what? After 60 days of my governorship, nobody sleeps on the floor or streets of California anymore. That ends in 60 days.
Paffrath is an internet personality.
At 29 years old, you're the youngest candidate for governor so far. You've had great success.
Kevin Paffrath is a real estate broker.
And fast-track permits, even for remodels. To which I say, yes, meet Kevin. Appreciate that you have come up with a lot of logical plans here.
there's more to dig into. I hope you come back on the show, Kevin.
But you might not know that I've been together with my wife for 13 years. I'm also a dad. I have two beautiful young boys, 3 and 5, Jack and Max, and I'm concerned about what the future.
All right, I'm going to move this forward a little bit. You get an idea who he is. Here we go. I mean, this is a pretty sophisticated.
That will be able to keep that critical part of our employment infrastructure, those folks at the bottom.
Solving our water crisis.
This is interesting.
Just as an example, and this is just one example, when I become governor, we are going to use the best strategy for solving our water crisis. And it could be a combination of things, from more reservoirs to desalinization, or the idea that we've liked a lot recently, which has been building an aqueduct from Los Angeles to the Mississippi River, paying for cheap, clean water, sharing the cost of construction with other water-starved states like New Mexico and Arizona along the way, and doubling the flow of water to our Colorado River so we can finally end our water shortage. Folks, there are common sense solutions. We just need a leader who stops wasting money and instead prioritizes spending appropriately.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Okay, so you get it. Hold on a second.
Remember, if you like what you're hearing so far, the next $1 million donated.
Okay, so that idea with the Mississippi River. Okay, I love that shit. Now maybe they could do something a little more locally. Who knows? But at least the guy's fucking thinking outside the box. Okay, so he's saying we're gonna tap into the Mississippi River, and along the way we're gonna bring water to New Mexico. We're gonna bring water to Arizona. We're gonna bring it to California. I mean, it's a really bold and audacious idea. And it's clear that he is, look, wherever you chime in on government, whether you think it's important or not important. I mean, if you're living in the state of Oregon, and you have to deal with Governor Brown, and you probably are thinking government's pretty fucking important at this point, because that version of government's not very good. And I'm not here to pitch government, right? We should all be way more independent. And again, at a national level, less is the best. Statewide, California's got big issues, and the over taxation's huge. Taxes are huge there. And then the permit stuff, really difficult, super hard to get a business started. Anyway, he's got really interesting ideas, interesting energy. He's 29 years old. He's going through his Saturn return. Now, remember the water piece now. This is important. The water piece is important. So I'm going to show you because it relates to his chart. And this is the article in the San Francisco Chronicle. And he's a funny follow on Twitter. Like, he will, and even on YouTube, he'll it's like he ripped Bernie Sanders a new asshole. He ripped Ocasio-Cortez a new asshole. And you saw him on Fox Business. I mean, when have you seen a Democrat go on Fox Business? This guy's interesting. Honestly, I hope he fucking wins. I don't think he will, but I hope he wins. He might have a chance because his chart is kind of trending in that direction. So, all right, so look at this. A water pipeline to the Mississippi. Democrat stirs up recall debate with unusual ideas. So he says right there, JFK Democrat, you're not going to pay any taxes less than $250,000 in terms of your income. So he says it's time to end the big threat and make sure Larry Elder's not become next governor by voting Kevin Paffrath, he said. That's typical, I think. Yet, unlike Elder, who has pushed voting conspiracy theories, each of Wednesday's participants clearly said they would accept the results of the election. Elder's campaign has not responded to the question from the Chronicle, blah, blah, blah. Let's go back to Paffrath. He says he proposes building 80 emergency housing facilities, many of them convention center sized, deploying the National Guard to help round up the homeless. Okay, why not? Right? Why not? No homeless on our streets within 60 days. Who else is fucking saying that? Okay. Is Larry Elder saying that? Is Gavin Newsom saying that? Did any other governor running for governor say that? No, he's saying no homeless in 60 days. Build the why not? I mean, fuck. You know, it could be worse. They could be there and defecating and becoming rotting vestiges of the human species, right? Why not? After the debate, Paffrath told reporters, "I know my plans sound bold. I always get worried that when people hear the plan, they're like, oh my gosh, this is outlandish. But it's better than what we're doing right now, which is virtually nothing. Why not?" Falconer, the two-term mayor who's running against him, I think he's from San Diego, questioned Paffrath's experience, noting that it's not the time for on-the-job training, like everybody else who's been a fucking politician. Has done a remarkable job of running a state government, right? So they're just going back and forth here, back and forth, back and forth. All right, so let's get into his chart. The Mississippi River thing is interesting. I'll show you why. Now, I do not know his time of birth. I'd like to. But this guy's got a really interesting chart. Like, really fucking interesting. This guy has a visionary, he's got a visionary chart, but he also has, I think, the executive ability to back it up. I'll show you. It's very unusual. He's born in Germany, by the way. Probably an army kid. Don't know much about him again. Born in Wilburg, Germany, January 26th, 1992. So he's a millennial. And look at all this freaking Aquarius. Look at all that Aquarius. Sun Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. To me, that's visionary. That's somebody who can handle details. Obviously, he's done well in real estate. He's carved out a nice little niche for himself on YouTube. 1.5 million subscribers. Not bad. There are guys who have car channels of 5 million people, by the way. But I like it. I like the Sun Saturn conjunction. He's going through his Saturn return. I think this is great. This is totally great. And this idea with the Mississippi River is fascinating because when you think of Aquarius, what do you think of the water bearer? He's a water bearer. He's bringing a new message to the voters. Again, this is just astrological here. And he wants to bring the freaking water from the Mississippi River to California. Hello. It doesn't get much more Aquarian than that, right? And then he's got just, this shitload of planets in Capricorn in spades. Trudeau in Capricorn, Mars in Capricorn, Mars Uranus conjunction in Capricorn. He's innovative. Now, for all I know, he could be the goddamn Antichrist. I don't know, right? But I like the guy, and I'd like to see him win. I'd like to see a 29-year-old with really far-out ideas and a lot of energy, just to see what would happen. Period. End of story. I'm not that interested in Larry Elder. I'm not interested in a longtime politician, mayor of San Diego like Kevin Falconer. I'm just not. But this guy's interesting, and I think the leadership is kind of baked into the chart. Look at all this freaking Capricorn, right? He's got Mercury in Capricorn, and Saturn, at least in this position, because I don't know what his birth time is, but because he made a lot of money in real estate, I decided to put right around this time, which was 4:30 a.m. Plus, he was born in another country. And Jupiter in the 9th house would be travel potentially to another country, meaning from Germany to the United States. So I thought, okay, well, this is interesting, at least this time. But he's got the Sun Saturn conjunction. This guy's mature, right? He's an adult, but he's different. He's just different. And he's got this Mars Uranus conjunction. He's going to be rebellious, but he's going to be rebellious within the context of structure. Right? Capricorn's all about structure, and he's true note is in Capricorn. So he's kind of built for this. He's built for business. He's built for government. He's built for politics. So fucking go at it, man. Have at it. And all these planets are really close in terms of conjunction. He's got a Venus conjunction with Ceres. So he could be a leader, right? Ceres in Capricorn is like a shepherd, but it's shepherding, kind of a long-term vision. I hope he gets elected. I think it's a really fucking interesting chart. And he's got this Moon Pluto conjunction in Scorpio, which is really intense. He doesn't give up. This guy is not a quitter. And we can look at Pluto trining is Mercury and Moon trining is Mercury. That's, and in the sextile, I'm sorry, it's a sextile. In the sextile, he's willing to take advantage of it, right? To mine the potential of that. I think he's an interesting character. He's got Jupiter in Virgo, which is very service oriented, coming in and trining, problem solving with a retrograde. It could be like super interesting for him in terms of finding solutions. I like this dude. He doesn't have a lot of fire. He does not have a lot of fire. That said, he's got that Mars-Uranus conjunction. So as long as he's not bored, as long as he's innovating, as long as he's excited, that Mars could be enough for him to carry the day. He's got Chiron in Leo. So that goes back to his childhood. Something happened to him in his childhood between 5 and 7, right? Again, I don't know the house. This is a time I picked up because it's just a fast kind of rectification. But I would say that whatever happened to him during that time, maybe he moved to the United States. I don't know. But it changed his childhood. And I think he got a lot more serious because there's this inconjunct going on with Chiron here and bringing him kind of into the Capricornian world. So I think he grew up fast. Something happened during that time where all of a sudden I think he moved out of his childhood really quickly. It's a very interesting chart. Super, super interesting chart. He's got Pallas in Sagittarius, which is, I think, it's kind of visionary, actually. Pallas pattern recognition. And then he's got Saturn right there. He's got Saturn getting ready to, it's on his sun right now. And Saturn retrograde could be really good for him in terms of like a recall, right? Recall energy. Look, I hope the guy wins. I think he's really interesting. I'd love to interview him. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But whatever happens, like you haven't heard that last one. Look at Jupiter in his chart. The guy's kind of a fucking genius. I'm telling you that right now. He's got a Jupiter biquintile with his sun, a Jupiter quintile with his moon. He's got a Jupiter trine to Venus. He's got a Jupiter trine to Mars. He's got a Jupiter biquintile to Saturn, Jupiter trine Uranus. That's brilliance. He's got Jupiter trine Neptune. This guy's got a great angular Jupiter. Look at that. He's fucking brilliant. He's got the sesquisquadrate with Jupiter and Mercury. So his ideas may be a little ahead of the time or ahead of their time. He may have to prove them out a little bit. He's got a sun quintile moon, so he can capture the public's imagination. He's a very interesting chart. Very interesting. Oh, by the way, where are the squares? Where are the squares in this chart? Like there is no freaking squares. He's got some oppositions. They're not, he's got a Mars opposition to what? His true node, right? Is that right? Mars opposition to south node. Where's Mars? Where's Mars? Right there. Mars opposition south node. Conjunct his true node. Mars opposition south node. Not a huge opposition. Not a huge opposition. And then he's got Saturn opposing the south node. Right down there. Yep, right there. Saturn opposing Chiron. My bad. Saturn opposing Chiron. Boom. No squares. This guy is pedal to the metal. Pedal to the metal. I hope he wins. Super interesting chart. Outside the box thinker, but not a flake. Not with all that Capricorn backing it all up. I think he could win. If there's a chart, I haven't looked. Newsom's chart. Newsom's a Libra. I don't know about Larry Elder. I'm not interested in Larry Elder. I mean, think of the name Elder, right? He's older. I want this guy to win. I want somebody who's young. I want a fucking millennial who has some vision to take center stage there. Mix it up. See what happens. Kevin, if I was there in California, I don't trust the fucking legal system or the voting system, but I would vote for you. 100%. All right. That's going to do it for tonight. I have more I could bring up with, what's his name? Dan Rudier and Ebenezer Sibley. But I think this was a little more interesting. I think Kevin Pathrath is a lot more interesting than Ebenezer Sibley. All right. I'm going to get out of here. Chatlandia, it's been a blast. Thanks for being here. What do we got? 187 people watching. I know it's been a long night. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Let's see. Wikipedia says he married this when he was 18 months old. Okay. So it's not the immigration. Something happened to him then when he was around that age. He grew up very quickly. Very, very quickly. Let's see. The new Matrix. Paulette met Newsom and Kamala in Cousin Circle. Just no. Oh, how about that? Let's see. I only have 2 squares. Squares are not bad. Some squares can be really good. That's not his lesson in this lifetime. That guy is built for fucking speed. I'm telling you that right now. He's built for speed. Anything else? Mr. Matrix. I'm not saying he's going to fix the Matrix. I think he's interesting, okay? I think he's interesting. From an astrological perspective, I think the dude is interesting. Why not? You live in fucking California, you know? You're living in the Matrix. Why not? Let it roll. Let it fucking roll. Whatever happens, happens. Right? The rest you're responsible for. All right. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to discern what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Bye for now. You know, ultimately, whether he fixes the Matrix or not, like, let it be fucking entertaining, right? Let it be entertaining. Do something fucking different. Just roll with the difference, right? Just roll with the difference. Why not? Why not? Find something to dream about. Find something to dream about. What's your dream? What's your dream? You know, we know the world that we don't want. We know that world. We get it. It's not enough. Not enough. Find your dream. Maybe tonight when you go to sleep. Bye for now.